Well, friends, let's come together this morning, and good morning to you.
Good morning.
On a day where we're once again filled with tragedy from yet another mass shooting and also a hurricane bearing down on our coasts. Let's take that all in and we'll speak to it in our time of prayer. And let's feel safe here, though. Let's feel in the moment. Let's feel God's presence here in our lives, bringing an arm of safety around each of us, sharing love to you and you and you and you and you. Let's feel that love, feel that presence, and feel your love, reminding ourselves, as we do every week, that no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, I am welcome here.
Today's scripture reading is taken from Luke chapter 14, verse 1, and verses 7 through 14. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to share a meal in the home of one of the leaders of the Pharisees, they were watching him closely. When Jesus noticed how the guests sought out the best seats at the table, he told them a parable. When someone invites you to a wedding celebration, don't take your seat at the place of honor. Someone more highly regarded than you could have been invited by your host. The host who invited both of you will come and say to you, "Give your seat to this other person." Embarrassed, you will take the seat at the least important place. Instead, when you receive your invitation, go and sit in the least important place. When your host approaches you, he will say, "Friend, move up here to the better seat." Then you will be honored in the presence of all your fellow guests. All who lift themselves up will be brought low. All those who make themselves low will be lifted up. Then Jesus said to the person who had invited him, "When you host a dinner or a lunch, don't invite your friends, your brothers and sisters, your relatives, or rich neighbors. If you do, they will invite you in return, and you will have your just reward. Instead, when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, lame, and blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you. Instead, you will be repaid when the just are resurrected."
So in your bulletins, there isn't a sermon title today, but that's only because I didn't put it in there when I sent the information to Elizabeth. But now it's here. Creating an open table, and fittingly on Communion Sunday, right? So In a paraphrase, maybe, unless you know exactly what I always say when I stand behind the communion table before we begin our liturgy, what do I say as part of our instructions? All are welcome. I explained that here in this church and in the United Church of Christ, we practice an open table where all are welcome at Christ's table. So what do you think I mean when I say that? Why do I say that?
Because in a lot of churches, it's not an open table.
Yeah, in a lot of churches, it's not an open table, right? If you're not, in Protestant churches, if you're not baptized, or if you're not a member of that church, or so on and so forth. How many of you Protestants have ever been to a Catholic wedding? How's it feel when you get that little instruction from the priest that you can come forward for a blessing but not partake in communion?
Doesn't allowed to cantor for the Catholic Mass at college, but not take communion.
Right.
Like, really?
I was like Jenny Guy when we would have a discussion about this. She just goes and takes the communion. Right on.
Bring it.
I would too. But I haven't yet, though. I get too nervous. I like rules, right?
Make sure you're wearing your collar.
Yeah, I'll wear my collar. They won't know. Except I'll totally mess up what you're supposed to do when you get up there. So, but joking aside, it is meaningful to people, especially our guests who have never been here and they show up on a communion Sunday. You don't always know what the rules are, and heaven knows every church handles communion differently. And it could be a scary thing to come see all these people coming forward, and what the heck are they doing when they get up here if you've never taken it through and taken communion through intinction like we do. But for me, ceremonially, the reason that I love the way we have communion is because it feels like we always talk about being a family, and it feels like we're a family gathering around a table, seeing into each other's eyes as we receive that communion. And that's meaningful, right? So then, why do we even take communion? What does that symbolize? Bob?
I think that, if I understand it right, it's in the early church, Christians gathered when they were being persecuted, so they would have some common bond, and then they would take communion at the time. So what it does is it binds people together, especially if they're being persecuted.
Sure. What else? What else does that symbolize, Connie?
I remember my catechism. An outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace.
An outward and visible sign of an inward spiritual grace.
It's
Pat?
kind of copying after the Last Supper.
Right. The Last Supper. And who was at the Last Supper?
Disciples.
And one of the disciples Jesus knew was about to betray him, that would ultimately lead to his death, but he invited him anyways and welcomed him in. Right? The table is a symbol, right? We don't actually have to go out into the community and gather people around a table. We can create an open table symbolically through our actions and our words. How so?
By being welcoming, understanding,
Right.
listening.
Listening, meeting people where they're at. And we call communion, oh, Beth, please.
By responding.
By responding.
Like we see this morning.
Yes. Yes. I mean, look at this. We're a little church. You wouldn't know it. And we call communion one of our two sacraments, right? What is a sacrament? Think of it as something that separates the holy from the mundane. I stole that off the back of your bulletins this morning. Aren't you impressed that I could remember it all the way from there to here, though? But it's something that is spiritually important, at least to me, to celebrate in Holy Communion. That's why I feel it's important to wear my alb on Communion Sundays, no matter how hot it may be, because of that extra level of importance that I want to give to that meal, right? And it's why, no matter what church you're in, that's such a holy time. It's such a quiet, spiritual time. But as I said, that's just a symbol of what we could be outside. When I use the words creating an open table, or words that I like that Elizabeth used, creating a welcome table, how do you think that could work out here in a very divisive, angry, scared world?
The same way it works down at City Picnic.
Yeah.
Everybody's welcome.
Right.
Doesn't matter who you are. The same way it works that if you don't put boundaries in there, then anybody is welcome. Then everybody's at least open to the fact of, let's give it a try.
Right.
If you put the boundaries in there, then if you forget somebody, then you forget everybody, pretty much.
Thanks, Linda.
The messaging that we get from other denominations and so forth that you enumerated earlier, in terms of the limitation to communion, all except that kind of thing. That kind of language is ubiquitous. Everybody hears that, they know that. So in the wilderness of thought, out comes, you're welcome at this table. It goes in stark contrast to what we've known, what we've been ingrained, or I can't because, that kind of thing. So it's refreshing, it's endearing, and it makes me feel like I am welcome here.
Right. Thanks again.
I think that part in the reading where they talk about the lowest seat and the highest seat. I think there's so many people in society who have been told that they can't get any closer than that lowest seat. And if we're in a position to open up a seat beside us, wherever we happen to be, and pull them in and say, sit by me.
Yes.
However that plays itself out. If we can lift up and show everybody that the people they're used to seeing and putting at that lowest seat don't belong there, if there's anything we can do in that way, that's going to benefit everybody.
Absolutely. And you take that to the world of education. So many of you are or have been educators, and you know that if a student feels or even hears that they won't achieve anything, or you won't amount to anything, or simply by them not having the tools necessary to succeed sometimes, as their peer next to them, they don't feel like they can get above that spot that they're in, right? You've seen that, I'm sure. Linda, you've seen it, I guarantee. And so if they don't feel that they can achieve something at such a young age, and they're told that by parents or whomever, they won't. They won't.
I think what Beth said is so majorly important. The simple, come sit by me. Oh, that is so important. Haven't you all walked into a room and felt awkward?
Yes.
And some good
Every
soul
room.
would say to you, come sit by me.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, you feel okay. You feel welcome. You don't feel like that outsider.
Right.
That come sit by me is so simple and so powerful. And so powerful and so important.
Yes. And it happens. It happens all the time, right? You're in a different scenario. I felt awkward. I always feel awkward. But so after we had our immigration rally here, and you'll recall that in donations we collected about, I don't remember now, $1,400 or so, thank you, Ken, for the group that works with immigrants here in Canton. And I was delivering, Greg and I were delivering that donation to their offices. And I felt awkward because, and I said this in a sermon before, because I'm a white male walking into what is their safe space. They don't know who I am. They don't know if I'm law enforcement. They don't know anything. And you could just see people clamming up. And it wasn't until this young woman who is also white, who was a volunteer or employee there, I'm not sure, sort of quickly took us under her wing, got us to the right guy, and made them feel like we were okay. And that's the come sit by me. That was someone seeing that I was in an uncomfortable spot and sort of guiding me. And that meant the world, because we were out of our realm. I don't speak Spanish, and so I couldn't explain it. That meant a lot. Bob?
I totally agree with Bonnie and Beth in terms of having somebody sit next, or that you would have them, like, inviting them to come sit next to you. But I also think you can go and sit next to somebody else also.
Yes.
And that sounds like, well, what am I really doing here? But basically, it's like you are just as entitled to the air you breathe as the next person.
Right.
And to me, right now we have two teenage grandchildren, and I'm lecturing them all the time on dating advice, which is Constance is always saying, stop it. But as an example, our oldest grandson is 6'3", so what I've been telling him is that every young lady under 6'3", 6'2" or something, she's waiting for you to sit next to her or to invite her out. So it's almost like you almost have to overcome that bias that I'm not good enough either. But you are always entitled, you're a child of God. You're entitled to just be a little bit slightly pushy. In addition to them being able to sit next to you, you can sit next to them.
Yeah. Absolutely. Great point, Bob. Terry?
Well, I'm rather a newbie. I've been here a little bit over 3 months, but everybody has made me feel welcome, but Pat especially invited me to her pew. I just feel like I'm at home here.
And we all know what that's like in churches, right? That's a great point, because you walk into a church and you're new and you know everybody has their pew. That's just how it works. Now, some of you like to switch it up on me, and then I can't find you. But no, that is, we all know that. If you go as a guest to someone else's church, it's awkward. You're like, oh, I don't want to take someone's seat. But when you're invited into their pew, that's a big deal. Thank you. Beth and then Connie.
I had a friend here with me last week, and she had experiences growing up in the Methodist church that really turned her away from church completely for about 40 years. And as we were leaving last week, she picked up one of the rainbow brochures on open and affirming churches out there. When she said, could I find a church like that? And we Googled open and affirming UCC churches and found one within about 5 miles of her house. And she said, I think I want to check them out.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of welcome and comfort and inclusion she felt here.
That's awesome. Thank you, Beth. Connie.
When you speak of an open table, I kind of think I'm going to get fed, right? If you're inviting me to whatever your house has, and perhaps just sitting next to somebody or saying hello to them is what they needed to be fed.
Yes. Yes, because it's not just food that feeds us. It's, Beth brought up a concept, an idea here recently of writing note cards to people and just getting together after church just to be with each other in that presence, in that safe space with these safe, friendly, loving people, where we're not having to have a potluck or put on a big fair, but to just be with each other and pour out our love or whatever else we need to write about. There's a lot to be said for that, right?
I have them today.
She's got them today. She's prepared. So, in the sense of the church, we speak of this open table a lot, here in the UCC especially. And so what I want you to think of in this coming week, with so much going on in this world and in your own worlds, I want us to try to be mindful of that and ask ourselves throughout the week, just try it for 1 week, how can I create an open table in this scenario that I'm in right now? Turn that concept into an action. Invite someone to sit by you, whether that is physically or spiritually. Invite someone to sit by you. Amen?
Lord, send your children.